Okay, let's do some viewer Q&A. We've got about 14 or 15 questions to get through, so let's see how fast I can blast through these so this video doesn't end up being an hour long. Rick, what device or system did you find useful to measure resting heart rate variability? We all know what it feels like to overtrain. It's very common for us older grapplers to live sore and fatigued for days and weeks trying to push forward while our bodies are saying rest. I would like to learn more about how the heart rate variability tells you when to dial it back. So a lot of fitness watches these days will do HRV testing, heart rate variability testing. What is HRV? It's the tendency of your heart to vary its tempo. We think of a heart rate as being real consistent, but it actually varies over time. So if your heart rate is, let's say, 60 beats per minute, that doesn't mean your heart beats exactly 1 second apart. It actually varies. It speeds up and it slows down. So that's what it means. It turns out that the more variable your heart rate is, the more rested and recovered you are, the less variability there is there, the less rested you are. And in my experience, on days when I'm feeling really fatigued, my heart rate variability test will come back bad. And on days when I'm feeling pretty good, the heart rate variability test will come back looking pretty good. So it tends to be pretty accurate. How do I measure it? I just use a chest strap, which I pair to my Polar watch. I think a lot of different watches these days will do HRV tests. On the Polar watch, they call it an electrostatic test. It's not called HRV. I assume it's the same thing. And so typically I will leave my chest strap on my nightstand, and in the morning as I'm waking up, I'll reach over, I'll grab it, I'll put it on, and I'll run the test. It has you lay down for a little while, and then it has you stand up for a little while. It takes a couple minutes to do the test, and typically I try to do it every morning. I haven't done it in a little while because I'm not being real diligent about my tracking these days, but that's how I do it. My only recommendation would be if you get a watch, get one that lets you track your HRV manually as opposed to it deciding when it does it, like in the middle of the night, for example. That's more convenient, but I have a feeling that for it to be good, reliable, consistent data, it needs to do the test at the same time every day. So I just do it in the mornings when I'm waking up because that's when my heart rate is nice and relaxed. And so typically that's what I recommend. I just earned my blue belt at 40. I know that I'll be bested by younger athletic guys sometimes. I've been training 5-6 days a week and we roll almost every day we train. Frankly, I feel beat up and weaker than I should a lot. Should I take more days off, or is there a supplement regimen that will help? I love training and I want to do it as much as possible. 5 or 6 days a week is a lot if you're over 40 years old. And it's hard for me to give you advice over the internet because I don't know you. I don't know what your fitness level is. I don't know whether you're overweight. I don't know what your mobility is. I don't know how hard you hammer when you train. So let me just give you a little bit of general advice. If your goal is a high frequency of training, meaning every day, and you are generally putting in a reasonably high volume of training, meaning the duration of the session is, let's say, 45 minutes or an hour. The only way you can do that in your 40s every day is if you keep the intensity pretty low. Okay, there's always tension between frequency, volume, and intensity. If you're training frequently and you have high intensity, you're going to have to keep the volume low. If you're training frequently and you have low intensity, you can keep the volume higher. Volume meaning how long the duration is. So you're going to have to play with that a little bit and figure out where that sweet spot is so that you can train every day. The other thing that I would tell you is when the only thing I do is train jiu-jitsu and I do it 5 or 6 days a week, that tends to wear me down. On the other hand, if I add a couple fitness sessions a week in there, and I don't go real heavy, I don't go crazy, but if I do a couple weightlifting sessions and maybe I do a steady state cardio session in there, I go for a bike ride, that sort of thing, it's kind of like magic. It tends to make me better able to recover on days when I'm training jiu-jitsu. So what I would recommend for you is maybe dial the rolling down a little bit, dial it down to 2 or 3 days a week, add a couple fitness sessions in there, and then begin adding more rolling sessions in and manage the intensity. If your goal, again, is to train every single day, you're going to have to keep the intensity under control. So that's what I would recommend. Tinker a little bit with the volume of effort, the volume of work, and the frequency you're doing, and see if you can find a sweet spot that lets you train as frequently as you would like. I have imposter syndrome at purple belt. About a year in as purple at one school, took a long break, pandemic, and moved, and joined a local school, getting tapped regularly by some blue belts and 100% from the purples. Didn't roll as much at last school, but done a bunch of privates. Has anyone ever traded in their higher belt for a lower because they don't think they deserve it at that school? It's not entirely unheard of to be demoted if you go to a new school and you don't meet the standards of the new instructor, but it is kind of rare. It doesn't happen that often. Here's what I recommend. You need to go to your new instructor and you need to tell them how you're feeling. If you're just going to class and you're feeling really bad about your game and you're leaving with your tail between your legs, that's not a good way to go, and you'll probably end up quitting because it's not fun. So you need to go to your new instructor, express your concerns, and say, look, I'm getting tapped a lot. I did a lot of privates at my last gym. I didn't roll as much. Do you want me to demote myself? And he might say, yeah, let's demote you. Or he might say, you know what, you're close enough. Your technical level is fine. You just need to roll more. So have that conversation with your new instructor and take it from there. I live in a town with no BJJ coach. We are using videos like yours and the Grappler's Guide as our daily instructionals. It's going well so far, 4 months of it, but we would like eventually to expand and bring in more students. This is both to benefit us and to share what we've learned. We do hope to find a coach, but in the meantime, do you have any advice for us going down this road? Yeah, so this can be a dilemma for a lot of people that live in areas where there aren't schools available. So let me give you a couple pieces of advice. Number one, run your school like a professional business, even if it isn't a real business, because you need training partners. You will never get good at jiu-jitsu if you don't have a really good group of solid training partners who want to go on this journey with you. And the way to attract those people is to have an environment that feels like a well-run school. What does that mean? It means you start class on time. It means you end class on time. It means your mats are nice. It means you keep your place really clean. It means you follow the same format. It means, everything that it means to run a real school. And you need that in order to attract the training partners. You can get by without a coach. You can't get by without training partners. We can't train jiu-jitsu without training partners. So that's my first piece of advice. Run this like a real school. Number two, you have to affiliate under somebody, because after all, who's going to promote you guys to blue belt? You have to be under someone. If you want students to actually commit to being part of your program, they have to feel like they are on a track that leads them toward getting ranked in jiu-jitsu. So you have to affiliate under someone. Go shopping, go find an instructor that wants to take you under their wing. Look for the instructors that are within driving distance of your school initially. And if you can't find someone that you really like, then you can go farther out from that. But you have to find someone and affiliate under them. It'll cost you a monthly fee to affiliate. But again, your training partners need to feel like they are on a track. They're not just training for no reason whatsoever. So do those things. Run it like a real school and affiliate under somebody. After having seen your videos and Roy Dean's videos, I noticed that your rolling and overall movements have a particular smoothness and fluidity that is not common. Thank you. It would be interesting to know your insights, pros, cons, and how to develop this style. Let me throw a few things at you. First of all, I think it starts by having an instructor that embodies those qualities. I come from the Roy Dean School of Jiu-Jitsu, and if you look at Roy's game, it's incredibly technical, it's very efficient, it's very fluid, it's very precise, and there's a lot of artistry there. He really emphasizes the artistic part of jiu-jitsu, and it's reflected in not only how he plays the game, but how he teaches the game of jiu-jitsu. So if you're a student in that environment and you're watching him teach every night, you become very motivated to try to mimic that approach to jiu-jitsu. So I think it starts by having that influence, and that's how I try to teach. I try to be that style of influence with my students. The second thing I would say is that you have to be in an environment where the students don't go 100% all the time. They are willing to moderate that intensity, because when you go 100% all the time, those windows of opportunity tend to be very, very small, and it's very hard if you're a white belt, blue belt, even maybe a purple belt, to learn a technique cooperatively and then actually be able to implement it against someone going 100%. Those windows of opportunity are just way too small. So you need to be able to moderate that intensity, to hold those windows of opportunity open longer so that you can get repetitions practicing that style of game. The third thing I would say is, when you look at Roy Dean teach, and this is how I try to teach, he teaches sequences of connected techniques. He calls them neighbors. You have to get to know the neighbors. And so we might start with, let's say, a positional escape, which leads to a dominant position, and then you might explore 2 or 3 or 4 things that are available from that position. And after a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of training in that environment, you develop a very, very mapped out game that has lots and lots of pathways. If you think about what it means to have a fluid game, essentially what you're saying is that you always have that next thing you can go to, and you are very efficient at going to that next thing. That's all a beautiful game is. It's the ability to see that window of opportunity and to move yourself into that position very efficiently. And so having a very mapped out game where you always have that next thing is a big part of it. And the last thing I would say is, if you look at the way that Roy Dean does belt promotions and the way I do it, we require our students to do a demo, a demonstration. What's a demonstration? It's when the student is given a list of categories of techniques, and they have to put a demonstration together. And of course, you have to roll at a level that's commensurate, skill level that's commensurate to that belt level, but the student has to put a demonstration together. And so, for example, to earn your blue belt under me, you have to do 4 side mount escapes, 4 guard passes, 4 mount escapes, 2 back escapes, 4 arm locks from guard, 4 chokes from guard, 4 arm locks from mount, 4 chokes from mount, 4 sweeps, 4 judo style takedowns, 2 wrestling style takedowns, and 4 leg locks. And that's a lot. When you tell a 4-stripe white belt, hey, good news, you're ready to start preparing your demo, and here's what you need to do, usually they freak out and they say, oh crap, that's a lot. And it forces them to get a training partner and start showing up to class early and drilling for a couple months so that they can then demonstrate these techniques and make them look really good. And so having an objective standard that you hold each belt level to, and having an instructor that embodies those characteristics in their own game, having a training environment that's not so severe so you can be playful, and learning connected techniques, I think that is the key to developing a really fluid style of jiu-jitsu. Do gaining skills in sports or martial arts make a person more athletic? Yeah, of course it will. However, mostly if you train in a sport, you're going to get adapted physically to the demands of that sport. In other words, if you play tennis every day, your lateral movement will become good. You'll develop foot quickness. You'll develop good hand-eye coordination. You'll learn the mechanics of the various strokes in tennis: forehand, backhand, slice, serve, etc. So you will be adapted to that particular thing. If you train Muay Thai kickboxing, your body will adapt and you'll become efficient and adapted to that training modality. So mostly when you train a sport, you're going to become adapted to that thing. And yeah, you become more athletic because you're training certain attributes. But if your goal is to become more athletic in a general sense, my recommendation is that you seek out some kind of GP program and train the various attributes of fitness: accuracy, timing, balance, coordination, strength, power, endurance, stamina, etc. And then you'll truly be athletic. What are your recommendations for tracking heart rate while rolling? I just used a standard chest strap. I actually tried a device that was an armband with a sensor on it, but that worked terribly because people are always grabbing at your arms. You're getting arm dragged, and that just didn't work. A chest strap seemed to work the best because people aren't grabbing at your chest. There's some friction there with body-on-body contact, and so you do get dropouts. Sometimes the sensor will get pushed down, or it'll shift or whatever, but that seemed to work the best. And I would just keep my phone next to the mat, pair it with my sensor, and then I would start a workout and I would just track it that way. Someone asked me about one of those tracking rings that you can get that has a sensor in it. I just wear a rubber ring. I'm not a fan of metal jewelry when you train jiu-jitsu. If you want to gross yourself out, Google something called degloving. It's where your ring can get caught on something and you can actually strip the skin off your finger. Actually, don't go look. It's pretty gross. But And I've never really heard of that happening in jiu-jitsu, but it makes me kind of nervous to wear jewelry. So my recommendation is just standard old-fashioned chest strap. I'm wondering how I develop the extreme focus and concentration that is necessary to quickly master a martial art or any other skill for that matter. I guess another way to put my question is, how can I get into a flow state predictably every time? I'm not sure I totally agree with your premise in this question. Do you need extreme focus and concentration to get good at a martial art? I don't think you do. What I think you need is consistency. You need to go to class as often as possible. A flow state is where your brain is totally disconnected and you are just operating on pure instincts. Your body is doing what it's trained to do. If you think about a skateboarder or a surfer or anybody that's engaged in some kind of physical activity, the ones that are really good at it, that can enter a flow state, they do it as a result of being so good at it that they can disconnect their brain. So what I recommend to you is just go to class, train as often as possible. Don't worry about extreme focus or extreme concentration. Just go to class, put in the work, and then you'll find that you'll be able to enter a flow state pretty automatically because your body will know what to do. Really enjoyed your Maximum Fitness for BJJ video. Very helpful, but I'm curious what your diet is like and what supplements you use. I tend to eat on the paleo end of the spectrum, meaning I keep my carbs relatively low. I don't eliminate them completely, but I keep grains, cereals, pasta, rice pretty limited because I'm a little insulin resistant and I gain weight real easy when I'm eating carby meals. I also make sure I'm getting at least 1 gram of protein for every pound of lean body mass. I'm very, very much a proponent for eating a lot of protein and good quality proteins. I also believe in keeping your fat intake relatively high. We've been told for a couple decades now that eating fat will make you fat, and there's all this non-fat food out there, but that's not actually true. We need fat. That's if you eat food that does not have fat, your body doesn't know how to turn off that hunger mechanism. So I make sure I have plenty of protein, plenty of fat, low carb, a little bit of fruit, and that's kind of it. I do a little bit of intermittent fasting. I tend to be on kind of this loose 16-8 window. I tend to eat 2 main meals a day with maybe a small meal in between, sometimes 2 with a snack, something like that. As far as supplements, a little bit of protein powder sometimes to assist me getting enough protein every day. I do take vitamin C, I take zinc, I take vitamin D, I take potassium, which is critically important. It helps you assimilate your electrolytes. I take magnesium just before bed. And I also make sure that my electrolytes are fairly high. I put an electrolyte powder in my water bottle before I go train. I've been using something called Element. It's the letters LMNT. You can go to drinkelement.com. They are a sponsor of this channel, and I'm a huge fan of that product. Little powder packets that you can put in your water bottle, and it tastes great, and it makes sure you're getting plenty of sodium. If you're an athlete and you're not getting enough electrolytes, then your performance is definitely going to suffer, and your recovery is going to be bad. So that's what I do. Can I get your opinion on changing gyms? I love the people I train with, but I feel it's lacking the technical training I need. I'm 52 and been training 2.5 years. Yeah, there's nothing that says you can't change gyms if you're not getting the technical instruction that you feel you need, or for whatever other reason. Maybe the training partners are too aggressive. Maybe they don't keep the place clean. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you might want to change gyms, and there's no rule that says you can't change gyms. So typically what I recommend is this. If you have access to a few different schools that are within a reasonable distance of your house, I recommend you go try them all. Go watch a class. I'm a huge proponent of going and watching class. That way you can see how the teacher teaches. You can assess the training partners and the environment there and see if people are knuckleheads, if they go too hard, or if they're smooth, or if they're technical, and get a good feel for the place that way. And then if you like it, then jump into a class. And then next week, do the same thing. Go watch another class and then go jump in. And that's going to give you the information you need to change gyms. New members throw wrong. Young wrestlers are rough. How do you safely train takedowns in your gym? Yeah, so it starts with becoming very, very good at break falls. Break falls are a critical skill, one of the most important skills that you can have as a martial artist. And that takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of time to become very, very good at being thrown and staying relaxed while you're thrown, and being able to make those instantaneous adjustments while you're airborne in order to land safely. So Roy Dean tells a story of when he went to Japan as an exchange student. They had him doing ukemi, break falls, literally for 3 months every single class. That's how important the Japanese feel that break fall skills are. So it starts with really good break falls. The second thing I would say is I'm a huge fan of what is called uchikomi in Japanese. Uchikomi is where you do everything associated with that throw or takedown, except you don't complete the throw. So let's say you're doing a wrestling style takedown, let's say a double leg, you strip the hands, you lower your level, you take the penetration step, you shoot, you get your hands in position, your posture in position, you cut the angle and you drive, but you don't take your opponent down. Or let's say you're doing a judo throw, you off balance them, you pivot into position, you load up, you take them to the point where they're about to get thrown, but you stop. And so uchikomi is a way to get a high number of repetitions in without throwing your training partners. So a lot of nights when I teach takedowns, I just have the students do those repetitions. I don't even have them complete the throw, because if you think about it, if your entry is bad, at best, it's going to be a terrible, potentially dangerous takedown, but at worst, you're not going to get the takedown. So getting a high number of repetitions on those entries is really where it's at. And then every once in a while you complete the takedown so your opponents are getting those repetitions without beating up their body. If you could do a video advising us white belts how to most effectively and efficiently become competent, that would be awesome. If this could include things to focus on the mat and things to do, drill, study in our free time, that would be even more awesome. Yeah, this is a really deep topic, probably too big of a topic for this particular video, but let me just throw this out there. There are two types of jiu-jitsu students. There's the one student that all they do is they go to class. They're not watching a lot of jiu-jitsu on YouTube. They're not drilling with a grappling dummy. They're not doing the mobility drills. They're really not doing anything. They just go to class. The second student is the person that does everything. They go to class, they're doing the mobility drills, they get a grappling dummy, they're buying the DVDs, they're watching YouTube, etc. In my experience, both as someone that's been doing jiu-jitsu for a very long time and somebody that's been coaching now for a long time, I can tell you that I have not seen a measurable difference in either of these two categories. In other words, the person that is doing everything, in my experience, is not becoming significantly better than the person that's just going to class. And probably the best example of this is actually my own son, my son Jordan. He's 21, he just got his purple belt, and he is one of those guys that loves jiu-jitsu, but he hates watching jiu-jitsu DVDs. He hates watching jiu-jitsu on YouTube. He almost never watches it. He doesn't follow the competition scene. He's not doing mobility drills. He didn't buy a grappling dummy. He's just one of those kids that goes to class, but he goes to class a lot. And I was never that way. I was always the second type of student, the type A personality that wanted to do everything. I actually owned 2 grappling dummies at one point. I had one with the little stubby arms, and then I had the one that was more human-like. And I literally own 100 jiu-jitsu DVDs. I've watched 10,000 hours of YouTube jiu-jitsu. I follow the competition scene. I do all that stuff. And here's what's interesting. My son Jordan is actually better at this stage in his development than I was after that same amount of time. He's incredibly technical. He's one of the most technical guys at my school. He's fluid, he's precise, his transitions are phenomenal. He's got it all mapped out. He has a beautiful, beautiful game, better than most people at my school, and yet all he does is go to class. So I think if you want to get good at jiu-jitsu, the best thing you can do, the most important thing, is just go to class as often as possible. And I'm not saying that these extracurricular things can't be useful, that the DVDs can't help, and so on, but those should be ancillary to the primary thing, which is just go to class as often as possible. Discuss financial freedom. I gathered that you made your money with your IT tech biz and that BJJ is more of a passion project. Actually, no, it isn't. I mean, my IT tech business was very successful for a long time, but ultimately that's a story of failure. I ended up having to shut the company down. When I started that business, it was in the early years of the internet when it was just the Wild West, and there were only a handful of companies in the world doing what we were doing. As a consequence, we grew incredible market share and we became very successful. But about a decade into this business, that market had grown incredibly competitive. At one point, we had like 300 competitors, most of them open source, a lot of them with VC-backed, VC backing. And so it just became just a very, very difficult business. And then eventually we got acquired, and then the investors, about a year into it, they walked away, and the whole thing turned into a nightmare, and we eventually had to shut the business down. So it was successful for a while, but no, these days I don't have a lot of financial freedom, and jiu-jitsu is one of the ways that I make my living, and I do some other things as well. Curious what the story is behind the dragonfly logo. I just think dragonflies are really cool. They're like a helicopter. They can fly forward and backward. They can hover. If I had to be an insect, I would probably choose a dragonfly. So I just chose that because I thought it was a cool insect. When I was brainstorming, trying to come up with a logo idea for The Art of Skill, I just kept coming up with all these different ideas. And then finally, I just thought, oh, a dragonfly, that's cool. And I just think they look cool.